Episode 2, Magical Realism. Hello and welcome to Reaction Shots. I am the host, Ian Hink. My shirt choice was bad. I blend into the curtains. So, you know, if you're listening in audio, you're probably getting the better experience. I am joined by a co-host over there, Michael Huber.
Hello.
How you doing, Huber?
Doing great.
Great.
Doing well.
Our special guest for today is Justin Angelmo.
Hello, everybody.
Justin and I co-created Seedlings with John Finger, but you also have a background in film. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, I have a background in writing and directing. I've worked on Hey Ash, What You Playin', the web series, which used to be with Game. We used to be part with Game Trailers for forever now.
Yeah, long time.
Long time. I've done some other web series, Baked Goods, and then of course Seedlings, and just working on new projects now.
Yeah. And you studied filmmaking in school?
Yeah, so I went to the film school at Loyola Marymount University, studied it was like production, so kind of film and television production at the time. The internet was still so new that they didn't really teach that, which was funny because that's all I was doing. I have technically never done like written or directed a full film or like a full television show. So like all my work has been on the internet, but that was like just coming to be when I was in film school. And like they were still kind of like pretentious about it, like ew, the internet. That's never gonna have any sway or importance.
Well, it was funny. It's funny because my program at DePaul was called Digital Cinema, and like it was one of the first ones that was just that.
That's cool.
So it was like some people were like, "This is a betrayal," you know?
Yeah.
But I was like, "Fine, it's fine." It was like third year that it had ever existed, you know? So like,
wow, dang. So they embraced it pretty early.
They embraced it pretty early. Yeah, I was there in like 2003. And it was the third year it had been around, I think, when I started. So I think it started in 2000 because I started my second year, after my second year.
Yeah. I remember there was one class, like a teacher that was very savvy. She was really cool. She came in and she kind of was teaching about new media, and it was mainly about like the internet.
Back when it was called new media.
Yeah, that was called new media.
Internet thing.
Yeah, what is that? Yeah, them and SAG. Yeah. A little late on the uptake. Anyway, well, thank you for joining us.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is Reaction Shots, the Easy Allies movie podcast. And this month we are talking about magical realism, which is defined sort of as... you know, the world of the film is presented as real, or at least consistent with a set of strict rules, you know, but usually it's mundane, like our own reality. And then there's any number of things, one or two, that are magical or somehow incongruous within that reality. And generally, it's unexplained or supernatural, and characters within the movie kind of just accept it most often than not, like... more often than not. So something that's magical realist would be like
powder.
Yeah, or like suddenly a character can you know, walk through walls but no one bats an eye, you know, like whatever. That's an example I made up, but stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking my favorite, one of the ones when we were talking about this earlier, when we were talking about our favorite, one of my favorite magical realist movies is Porco Rosso. And it's really just everyone's normal. It's normal. I think it's in Italy, and everyone's just normal human, normal reality, except he's a pig. Yeah, he's a man pig.
He's a man pig,
an actual pig person, and everyone just accepts it. Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, he's a pig.
I think that a few patrons, actually, we've got a lot of really great Patron comments this month, so I'm going to lean on that probably a little more than I did the first episode. And I've got a different kind of structure. We're going to start by talking about the assignment film this month, which was Brazil, and then we're going to kind of move the focus out a little farther and talk about other movies and stuff like that.
The assignment film sounds like a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see the assignment film?
You see the assignment film?
Rated R.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no, but I mean, kind of what this episode will largely be about is, in part, what does magical realism mean? Because even on the internet, even on a lot of like top 10 magical realist films, you know, they're like Groundhog's Day is on like almost all of them, and I would say that's not really magical realism. Kind of, it's more just a fantasy movie.
Yeah, because it has like a set rule,
right? And it's like, but then it kind of is magical realist, and if it depends on your definition for yourself.
Right.
But you know, for me, I've got a pretty strict definition of it for myself, where it's like one or two things that are incongruous with the rest of reality, where it's like, is that dude a dog? Is that dog that dude? I'm not sure. Maybe, you know, but then like films like Groundhog's Day or The Lobster, where the central conceit is this magical realist thing, but they live in a reality where that is an accepted rule. So, you know, in the film The Lobster, I would say it's probably not magical realism, even though it is this magical element.
Because everyone knows
because it's a known quantity.
Okay.
Right. Whereas then, with that definition, Groundhog Day might be magical realist, because then it's only happening and he doesn't understand why.
Yeah.
But he spends most of the film trying to explain it. So it's like, you know.
Yeah, because like him trying to understand it is part of the film.
Right.
Like, and there is a system happening that he is aware of and
right.
confused by, as we are as well as the viewer.
Right.
But yeah, I feel like to me, magical realism is like the film isn't questioning it.
Right.
It just happens magically.
And I do think that you know, The Green Mile is another kind of borderline one where it's like, you know, Coffee, I forget his first name. We'll get into it. Comment talked about it, but you know, he has this power, this healing power, and it's not explained. Characters do comment on it though. So it's like, does that make it not magical realism? The best example is, as a few patrons pointed out, so this will probably be reiterated, but Scott Pilgrim versus the World is great because, you know, things will just like, oh, I was taking a transdimensional highway that runs through your mind or whatever. Like, and that's just thrown out there. That's a thing that happens, and it's like, whatever. Like,
the Green Mile is a really interesting case because it's like so religious.
Yeah.
You know, and you hear of these stories and myths and legends in reality of people like healers, like healing people.
Yeah.
Versus something like Scott Pilgrim, like highway in your mind, you know.
Right.
So it is interesting. Like the Green Mile, I could see that being like a borderline one. Because it's like based in reality.
So yeah, some examples that I came up with that may or may not fit directly the definition of magical realism. I think that by the end of tonight, we may discover that like there are only like 4 films that actually employ magical realism, and a few patrons actually had some really insightful comments.
This is why I love being on the show, Ian, because I feel like I'm learning.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Like,
I want us to all feel included. I want us to
Yes.
feel like we're learning. I want it to feel like you didn't have to go to film school to follow along, but if you did, you know, this is like another class that you're taking, you know. But yeah, some examples that may or may not even be right that I came up with are The Green Mile, Amelie, Beasts of the Southern Wild, Birdman, Midnight in Paris, a lot of Hayao Miyazaki films, Borgman, Uncle Boonmi, Who Can Recall His Past Lives, was a pretty bonkers movie, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, The Royal Tenenbaums, Trainspotting, Antichrist, Barton Fink's, Swiss Army Man, The Ninth Gate, Venus in Furs, Blazing Saddles, Being John Malkovich, Adaptation, Upstream Color, Wings of Desire, Magnolia, Big, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, Holy Motors, Hudsucker Proxy, The Lobster, Twin Peaks, Stranger Than Fiction, Mulholland Drive. And then, of course, our assignment film for this month, Brazil. An example from this month's assignment, Brazil. Character is engulfed in papers and disappeared. It's not overtly explained within the film's reality. It does take place within a pretty much definitive dream sequence toward the end of the movie after Lowry's mind is broken.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Are dream sequences, do they count? You know, we'll get into that. But it's not meaningless. It's magical, but not meaningless. And patron Stephen Beaumont says the paper scene in Brazil is born of the main character's upbringing. He believes that all the red tape and paperwork that De Niro has been avoiding would catch up to him, and it mirrors the film's ending, bleakly stating that you can't beat the system no matter how corrupt it is, and you cannot escape, which I thought was really a cool point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, it's like whoa. But it's right, I think. Like, that's totally on the nose. if you're viewing this, if you're saying this counts, because yes, again, it's taking place within a fantasy thing.
Right.
And we'll get into this a little later too, but I think that Brazil is an interesting choice for this assignment because the assignment films in this in reaction shots have to fit not only this week's or this month's topic, but the previous month's topic. So Brazil, I thought, was a great example of world building, and had a few moments of magical realism within it. And then this is something that we're going to discuss throughout the evening, is that can a film that takes place entirely in a sort of magical altered reality, can it contain magical realism? And I think that one could argue that if you take Brazil, a film whose world has very strict rules, not all of which are outlined to us, the viewer, but has a consistency within itself, can you then set that as the mundane baseline and then look for magical realism jumping up from that point? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like in the film Stranger Than Fiction, which could be an example of magical realism because, you know, he's living in our world. He's having a mundane life. And then he starts hearing this narration. And then that is explained throughout the course of the film, like what's actually happening, you know. But the cause of that, and like if the author actually invented him, or if she just got lucky and was describing an already extant human being, if that counts, you know, I would say that almost is magical realism because that is never explained. Like why this is happening is never explained.
Right.
It's often questioned by Will Ferrell's character, but it's never expressly, addressed. So
I never saw that one.
Right, it's actually a pretty good movie. I actually really like it. It's kind of cute, but so like, could you then say, in a world where this kind of stuff is the norm, are there examples of magical realism? And I think that in Brazil there are a few. I think that things like the pipe, when he puts the two, he keeps getting the little pneumatic mail deliveries, and then he like connects the two pipes together, you know, and then the pipe starts expanding and explodes, stuff like that, and like this freedom, and like we discussed it in our commentary tracks, which you can get on our SoundCloud page. They don't come in the RSS feed, by the way, because I didn't want to bog you down with commentary tracks if you didn't want them, but you can listen along and sync them up to the movie. But we talked about how Brazil on the whole almost feels like a fantasy sequence, how like you could probably read this film as Sam Lowry just going insane, like maybe Robert De Niro doesn't exist, maybe that's just another aspect of his personality, like just who knows.
De Niro in that, and like the patron said about the papers eating him. Yeah, you know, there's this line early on where De Niro freaks out about the paperwork really briefly, and another way to look at it, maybe a simpler way, is that's before he's captured and he's in this, you know, Clockwork Orange mind capsule thing, and that when he's captured and he's in that, it's damaging his brain so much that he's recalling De Niro's fear. Yeah. So he's like seeing that in his mind too. Oh yeah, yeah. And he's being consumed by the papers. Yeah. So and that tied in. The reason I thought about that was because when he first sees the woman in his dream. Yeah. And then he's walking Jill, and he's walking through the halls, and then she's on the TVs, but then he doesn't really see it. But then it shows the other people. Then it shows the other people watching it, and she is on the screen. Right. And it's just like these subtle things he's picking up that are sticking in his brain that all kind of come unhinged when he's in that. Well, and like we were talking about is she, like, are we the viewer being shown her face in his dreams just because she's like, is he literally seeing her forward in time, or has he noticed her somewhere before and is subconsciously just calling her up? Or is it just some like, random every woman, like dream girl thing that he then retroactively inserts her into his mind and says, oh, that was you in my dream. But really it's just, I'm seeing you now and I'm remembering you in my dream, you know? Yeah.
Like, I always interpreted it as the latter, as that, where like he he sees her and is like, that's the ideal, my ideal that I've seen in my dream.
Right.
Like, it's got like whatever essence she has is the same essence. It might not necessarily be the same person, but in terms of like film technique, like film, it is, because to make the viewer understand that connection.
Right.
But yeah, it's actually really interesting with Brazil, because since it takes place in such a alternate reality where things are so extreme but still grounded, like everything is still grounded, but you kind of can accept, it's almost easier to accept the magical realism elements because you're already accepting a completely alternate reality. So it's still like, hey, wait a minute, like that didn't follow the rules of our world, but you kind of believe it because it makes sense in the world that they've created. Like the heightened atmosphere.
John Lipari, patron, says that as far as Tuttle's disappearance in Brazil is concerned, I think it's explained pretty clearly. We learn that Sam never actually leaves the interrogation chamber at the end of the film, so anything taking place after that is merely Sam losing grip on reality. When Jack starts his frontal lobotomy. I think that Jack's gunshot wound to the head is actually Sam's mind popping open once Jack inserts the tool. That's when his dream escape sequence starts. And I think that's totally true. And again, as we'll talk about in a minute, like dream sequences, do they count, do they not?
Yes, it could not count.
But I think that even before that in Brazil, there are strange examples of reality bending itself in an unexplained way. And one of the main ones for me that I can't tell if it's just a failing in the storytelling and character development, or if it's an intentional kind of fulfillment of this fantasy that is kind of a prevalent theme throughout the entire movie. Like Jill's sudden kind of like love for him, like after they've escaped and like bombing and like this stuff, how she shows back up and shows genuine care for Sam, and like she's in love with him suddenly, whereas before she was not. And like part of me wants to say that that's just a movie, you know, whatever, like love is hard to do in a movie that's not a love story, you know. And even then but part of me wants to say this is the beginning of Sam's mind unraveling. Like maybe it's a subjective view of her behavior that we're being shown, and like that gets a little hairy when they have sex, and like she's like, how about a little necrophilia, you know, like great line, but like, is this real? Is this not? It's before the dream sequence for sure. And like later on, Mr. Helpman says that she died, but the funny thing is she happened to do it twice. So it's like pretty clear she got shot resisting arrest. You know, like she's dead for good this time, you know.
What if she was dead to begin with?
Well, that's the thing. And like
he came home and she's not even alive.
Who knows?
You know, necrophilia. Like him and the dead corpse.
It could be,
you know, like I didn't even think he was like losing it then, you know, totally unhinged.
Well, like, and
they come in and he's really dragging a corpse, like no.
Well, and his behavior when he, like during the chase when he's taking control of her truck and like driving through barricades and like causing cops to crash, and like he starts laughing giddily like a crazy child, you know, and it's like this behavior is bizarre even for him, you know, and it's such a sudden turn that it really does seem like the whole movie is some kind of fantasy fulfillment. And in a way, the sad ending, quote unquote, is happy because he escapes. He's free. The only way to escape is by going mad, and he does it. He's out. He's living in the green place with Jill. And like, is that good? That's good because he made it out. He's fine.
Reality's your perception.
Yeah.
So,
whatever one you accept is the one that is. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, he's kind of unreliable because he's unhinged from the start.
Right.
So we never really know what is real or what is
and
his
like
subjective
how
reality.
much of the film is going along with that.
Yeah.
And we'll get into subjective realities too. But are there other good examples of magical realism in Brazil? Poogie says, Gilliam is a master of magical realism, in my opinion. Another master is Satoshi Kon. Perfect Blue is the is a movie by that guy, and it's a great example of the unreliable narrator being used in a film and tension that builds brilliantly because of it. It's no coincidence that Kahn was heavily influenced by Gilliam, once saying the most important influence on me at the time, I think, wasn't a single film, but the works of Terry Gilliam. Despite being fantasy, his depictions are quite bitter. His narration also throws curveballs, and rather than covering every point in detail, he takes the staging off to a completely different point and plucks out a single vivid theme.
Curveballs. Escalation.
Yeah. Like, we talked about that a lot, too, is like, this film, like, it's... The whole thing feels like an exercise in magical realism, and, like, that makes me want to question if the filmmaking itself can be magical realist. Well, there are a few examples from Patron quotes in a second, but, like, can the choice of lens or the choice of shot or the choice of story that you're telling be magical realist in terms of our own reality? Like, is the pure exercise of making a social commentary, is this film an example of a magical realist moment in our own real lives? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of a weird philosophical quandary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's an interesting thought.
It is interesting.
Imminent Jargon says that Brazil is an interesting choice for this topic, although perhaps less because of the dream sequences, but rather due to the way that the production design represents the normal, everyday world of the characters in almost a hyperbolic, cartoonish way. That might not be magic, but I think it introduces the possibility of the fantastic into the film. Ducts and pipes jut out of every corner in bizarre excess, screens are layered upon other screens, everyone seems to wear the same style of outfit, the spaces are either dizzyingly wide open, the lobby in Sam's workplace, or paralyzingly claustrophobic, his new office. On top of that, most of the movie is filmed with a wide-angle or fisheye lens, which also distorts how space appears in comparison to the human eye. On the one hand, that all creates a consistent aesthetic and sense of the world, but I also think it perhaps shows a world that is sort of breaking apart at the seams, and in which reality is already unstable, even before we get to the dream sequences. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think of his mom.
Yeah,
and her face is coming undone and unraveling.
Or in her friend, like the other plastic surgeon, just it like what that patron is saying kind of echoes what I was saying a second ago. Is Imminent Jargon. I feel like while there aren't, too many exact examples in this film that meet the definition of magical realism, I think that the filmmaking itself is sort of a magical realist kind of vibe, I guess. Like, and that's something that we were noting in our commentary track about how everything is shot with this wide-angle lens, and it makes everything feel, it makes everything feel simultaneously close but at a distance. Mm-hmm. And, like, there is this otherworldly quality, kind of an unsettling quality to everything.
Yeah.
I think that's just everything coming together, too, writing and sets and themes, of course.
Yeah, and, like, the set design and the art design and direction, like, I believe that is all, like, magical realism, because, like, you see these contraptions and even the tubes and the computers and the TV screens, and, like, they technically shouldn't work, but they do, and you accept it. Right. And they kind of play with that form of, like, you know what, if I just put some wires here, and that's underselling it because it's very well done, but, like, building it all up, and it's like, that's not how things work, but you accept it because it works. It's working in context of the film, and people are accepting it as working. Like, yeah, I guess that is how they would, in this reality, get the air in. You don't know the schematics of it, but it is like this kind of magical realist design of the entire world, and, like, all, like, the weird cable cars, or that, like, that like subway train car that
looks like somebody's bathroom.
Yeah, it looks like a bathroom.
From
You're like,
the 90s.
That actually isn't a working machine in real life, but in the movie it's working.
Right.
And you just accept it.
And, like, the bureaucracy itself, and, like, Tuttle working as an outlaw AC repairman, and then Bob Hoskins and his funny partner showing up as, like, part of the system, and, like, the paperwork and everything, but, like,
it's just so thought out, Ian. You're always talking about, like, rules and everything, and it's like, you have to imagine, before they set out to make this movie, they made rules from the biggest things, like the way society works all the way down to like a phone,
right?
You know, just rules for every single little thing.
You can take a sewage pipe and pump it into the air conditioner, and it'll fill these guys' suits up. Like,
I wonder if they made those rules before they even put that plot point in. You know?
Right?
That's how. That's how it feels. It
feels like impossibly. Like, I'm not sure how they got the sets or like how they did any of this.
Yeah.
But then it's similar enough to our own reality, like with the computers, like you were talking about, when he gets into when he becomes a member of information retrieval and the office mate, you know, or like the fact that like the office is split in half, even to the point where they're sharing a desk and they have to move the desk back and forth, and the filing cabinet behind him is split in half and the poster is split in half. And it's like, and that's so ridiculous. But that's this kind of heightened magical realism at work, because we, the audience, immediately see that and know that it's otherworldly, but we accept it along with the character because that's the world we're in.
Yeah.
And like, is that a definition of just this fantasy world, or is that magical realism? We may never know.
Yeah, I feel like it's more magical realism because it's playing with the fact that it's real in that context.
Right.
Whereas like fantasy, it's like this is just happening,
right.
This is the world, and these are its own rules. But with this, it's like very aware of our rules of
right.
normal reality,
yes.
and it's like playing with them and inverting them.
Yeah.
And kind of teasing us with them.
Yeah.
Like that scene where they're like tugging. Yeah. Like that.
Yeah.
That's such
or
a
like
good sequence.
yeah, like when he tries to use his office mate's computer, and like there's a straight up like hardball joke where it's like, oh, the thing doesn't work, and he's like, well, you didn't turn it on, you know, and then he just turns it on, and we're like, yep, that's how computers work. Like, we're right there with you because it's our reality but heightened, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, that's it, we're getting into the realm of surrealism and satire and parody, but I think that there is kind of common ground there between that and magical realism too. And I mean, it is a fine line, but if we're defining the terms as we go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Which all of this leads into me thinking about, is magical realism a theme, a device, a genre? Because like, if you look at the Wikipedia page, it claims that in literature, magical realism could be considered a genre. And I had never thought of it in that way. I always thought of it as, device might not even be the right word, but as a thing that exists in a moment within a framework of an entire work, you know?
Right.
And Confused Hulk says, one of the most impressive examples of the line between magical realism and realism is Grand Budapest Hotel. It's frequently referred to as magical realism, but to me it's more of an ideal realism, or a world that adheres to the same rules as the real world, but has an overall look and tone that captures the spirit of an idealist perspective. Or would you say this has magical realist overtones instead? Help me be less confused, which I like because the username is Confused Hulk. But I think that's a really interesting point, because Grand Budapest Hotel, and I would argue maybe all of the Wes Anderson movies, are this kind of heightened, idealized reality. And then I think even within those realities, there are occasional magical realist moments. You know, like the leopard shark at the end of Zissou, or just various moments like... you know, other examples that are escaping me at this time.
Yeah, it's more of like smoking or whatever.
They're more of like an alternate reality where everything's kind of in this idealized state, and then every once in a while, maybe not in some films, there'll be a magical element. Yeah.
Oh, and again, like the filmmaking techniques, like the use of miniature and stuff like that, even it lends it that kind of feel.
Yeah. Grand Budapest is a really interesting one for me, because I can't think of any one moment that would seem like magical realism, but just the, like Comment was saying, just about the presentation of it. Mm-hmm. But I'm leaning towards no. You know, I don't like you were saying earlier, you have a strict set of guidelines for it, and I just don't think costumes and location is enough by itself to really be considered magical realism.
I would think that in the Wes Anderson movies, like, I mean, Moonrise Kingdom, I think, has some definite magical realist moments where, like, this adult camp counselor would marry two children together without batting an eye, or, the scene where they're all kind of like climbing down that rope or hanging down that rope at the end. It's like, it's a funny visual, you know? And Wes Anderson does stuff like that where it's a funny visual and you accept it. I think a great example, now that I'm thinking about it, is the assault on Ping Island in The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, when he's rescuing the Bond company stooge and Jeff Goldblum. It's like this crazy ass shootout that you accept, you know, in a movie. But even I think within the realm of that reality is extremely unlikely to have been, like, worked. But it just does. And just like does, because almost just because Steve Zissou believes it will. You know? A similar moment is at the end of American Psycho, where he has this like American action movie style shootout that in theory is happening in reality, you know, but is this just an artifice of film? Is it a commentary on that kind of power fantasy? You know, I would say that that's a magical realist moment within the reality of that film.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, I guess like personally, like even in my own filmmaking, I always see it as like a device. And now I'm thinking about it, like we use that all the time in Hey Ash.
Oh yeah.
And like sometimes sometimes it will be very like magical realism in the sense where people accept it. It just happens, and not even the characters within the show or the reality question it.
Right.
Sometimes we question it, like I guess we invert it as we please in order to whatever makes a joke funnier.
Right.
So sometimes it's like, you know what, Ash is just going to be able to teleport wherever she wants, and everyone just accepts that no one's questioning that she's teleporting. But then other times she'll maybe have some other weird superpower, and we'll have Anthony commenting on it.
Like, you can't do that.
Yeah, like if that kind of helps the joke sell.
An example I just remembered from Hey Ash is when she says something like, "You're colorblind, so if I had colors on, you wouldn't be able to see me at all," you know? And he's like, "That's not how it works." And then at the end of the episode, she's like covered in red. And he's like, "Ash, where are you?" And he looks in and he can't see her, and then he leaves, you know? Like,
and it's totally how it works.
Yeah.
In that reality, yeah. So we like subvert that, I guess, at our whim in order to, you know, whatever makes the joke the funniest or the moment, kind of serve the humor.
I think that.
But yeah, so as a device,
that's how I live my life.
Yeah. So I guess like I really see it. Yeah, magical realism more as I mean, and maybe you, like you said, device isn't the right word, but you like employ it to kind of either, you know, serve a joke or serve another thematic element of your piece, or kind of create some atmosphere that moves the story along, or that supports it. So yeah, it's really interesting.
I think this fits in really well. Patron John Lipari again says, "I'm not sure magical realism fits into either genre or device categories. It's more of a function in film that is a requirement of the audience. Its closest comparison being suspension of disbelief. And usually they work in tandem."
Ooh, yeah. I actually really like that.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like that a lot. He might have articulated that, or they might have articulated that right on the nose perfectly. Yeah.
It does feel like that. It's a requirement of you.
But it's a collaboration as well, I feel like, with a movie. And I feel like the movie needs to be able to set up the rules in a believable way for me as a viewer to give them the benefit of the doubt and to have suspension of disbelief.
To sign up for it.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
They have to kind of.
They can't just throw everything at me on a whim. You know, like Brazil, when we were watching it, everything is just in place, all the rules, and you just go with it, and they slowly peel it back, and just add on to the rules leading up to the final 20 minutes of just insanity. But by then, I'm fully on board and signed up. Right. So
it's kind of interesting. Yeah, it is definitely a relationship and a communication with the viewer, and in a way, it's kind of your trust with them, because you can kind of like this. You're showing them like, this is how I'm telling a story. This is how I'm portraying it. This is all what I'm. These are the devices I'm using. The storytelling I'm using. And then if you kind of bend that a little, and they're like, hey, but if you do it in a way that, you know, serves a story and serves your character, and I guess doesn't push it too far, which is subjective, you're kind of like, you know, it's the difference of like telling like a little humorous lie or joke.
Right.
And having them play along, or if you do it too much, you can totally betray the trust of the viewer, and then you're out of it.
Yeah.
Like then it's like becomes like, oh, that's a plot hole, or it was lazy, or they couldn't think of anything better.
Yeah.
So like I can see it totally be like a relationship and weirdly based in the trust, because it requires both. It requires the audience to be signed up for it and to be aware of it and thinking about it and accepting it, really. Totally. So you're kind of. And
I think that at the hands of a master, you can even then flip that, subvert that. That expectation. Like David Lynch is a great example. Mulholland Drive, just like plot coming back in on itself and like showing you what you think is real and what is not. I mean, Lost Highway is a great example where halfway through the main character just changes to a different person, and it's just like, yeah, that's just what's happening here. I think another brilliant example is Michael Heniki, who Cachet is one of my favorite films. I would say that almost even has a couple of moments that are just so startling that they almost verge on magical realism. But the true example would be Funny Games, where minor spoiler here for Funny Games, but like it's about this family being kind of scandalized and tortured by these two crazy people, and
kids basically.
Yeah, just kind of everything going on is not only kind of magical realism, especially in the rewind sequence when one character is shot and then the other character goes no, and then rewinds the movie so it doesn't happen. But like, but this movie is an indictment of viewer pleasure in this kind of film, and like taking that kind of magical realist kind of device to punish the audience for taking pleasure in anything that's happening, Like, if you view that movie as a comedy, it's a whole different experience. Like, go in and just try to laugh at this movie, like, because the joke's on you, Yeah. It's kind of interesting to, like, flip the requirement of the audience and say, no. You think I'm playing along with you, but I'm punishing you. I'm laughing at you for watching this movie. Talking again about the difference between magical realism and fantasy, Alexander Zyryanov, hopefully I didn't butcher that too terribly, says, I think the difference between magical realism and fantasy is that in fantasy, magic is crucial for the plot, while in the case of magical realism, the story can be told without unexplainable events. Which leads me into the next big question. Is Harry Potter magical realism? I think that we could give a pretty quick one-word answer to that.
No.
Again, John Lipari comes out and says, I would define magical realism as something that doesn't fit within the established universe of a film, but makes sense to the viewer because of our relationship with the protagonist. Films like Harry Potter aren't magical realism because magic is real in that universe and follows an established law. Liana Alexandru adds, the difference between fantasy and magical realism is that in fantasy, the authors create new worlds with their own rules, even if that world closely resembles our own, like Harry Potter. And when those rules are broken by something unexplainable, characters react to that and point it out. Whereas in magical realism, the world is as close to the real one as it can possibly be, with apparently the same rules. However, the appearance of the supernatural does not trouble the characters in any way.
Yeah, that's a nice like dirty viewpoint or perspective to see, like, is it magical realism or not?
I mean, again, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, at the end, she just opens some kind of trans-dimensional door and they float through it. That's just normal.
Yeah. It's not like they don't make they're not going to take like a 5-minute scene to explain what's happening.
Yeah.
Why you can't do that.
What about Pan's Labyrinth? Did anyone bring that up?
Well, that's our next thing. Let's say magical realist segments or frameworks. How about films that have fantasy worlds that exist for a character apart from the real world? Think Pan's Labyrinth, The Fall, Sucker Punch, The Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland. Are these examples of magical realism or fantasy? Is there a difference? Are they mutually exclusive? I'll start us off with a patron comment. Kyle Lee asks, would Howl's Moving Castle be considered magical realism? Prior to Sophie being cursed, Her life is very rooted in the real world, but from here on out, there are many magical things that she encounters, often taking the mundane, like a flame or a scarecrow, and giving them a life of their own. It's unknown if Sophie would have recognized these magical beings prior to being cursed, or if her perception would have kept them as normal. I suppose you could find examples of magical realism in all of Miyazaki's work, even all the way back to Castle of Cagliostro, when you consider the almost supernatural skill of many of the characters. Another example that I thought of while I was reading that just now is Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, where there's a whole world of kind of like underground London that you don't notice. You'll walk by it, you'll see it, you can even talk to someone, but if you're not in the know, if you haven't really seen it, you don't grab on. You can't actually see it. You can't process it. And it's all there, it's just you don't see it.
That's a movie?
Yeah. Well, they made a BBC miniseries out of it.
Was it cool? Sounds cool.
I mean, the book is cool.
Yeah.
The BBC miniseries is called Neverwhere.
Neverwhere.
I haven't watched American Gods yet either. Another Neil Gaiman joint. But the BBC series bothered me because it's British and they pronounce Marquis Marquis, which just that's just weird. Like valet. It's valet. It's I don't know. Whatever. I'm not coming at you. I'm not coming after you, Britain. It's just interesting to me. But yeah, I mean, what do you guys think of that? Like this kind of in Pan's Labyrinth, it's her escape, right? It's her mental escape. But then in the end, you're questioning if it's real or not because it kind of takes its toll on her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or in other things like The Fall, is this just the imagination of this girl and Lee Pace as they tell this story together, or are, I think in The Fall, like that's just what it is,
Yeah.
But or Wizard of Oz or Howl's Moving Castle, like once you're cursed or knocked unconscious or whatever, you start to notice things, you see things. In the case of Howl's Moving Castle or Wizard of Oz, you're transported somewhere else, but maybe she was just hallucinating most of that,
I feel like that's an underlying theme of a lot of this magical realism is like mental damage. Whether it's people looking for an escape or people that are going crazy. And it's their perception of what is real and that leads the audience to question it.
Yeah.
So then does that make it like not magical realism or less? If it's
that's kind of the core question here, is that I would probably say that it is not, because it could be explained. Much like Lowry's dream sequence at the end of Brazil, that's a dream sequence.
Right, because it could still take... there's nothing magical about it if it was... In a way, that sounds really sad, but there's nothing magical about it if it was just a dream in our normal reality, because in our normal reality, we can have these wild dreams, wake up, and you're like, oh, I didn't get eaten by 12, like, tiger creatures or so, whatever the hell your dream is.
Newspapers didn't swallow me.
Yeah. Exactly. So that is, I feel like, to me at least, it wouldn't, if it can be explained in a way, or if it's like a dream, then that's something else. With magical realism is more like the Scott Pilgrim one you were saying, where there's no explanation for it. It's just this weird element to the world that kind of you accept because it makes sense, or you don't accept in some cases, which I was trying to think of a film where it's something magical realism occurred and it took me out of it. Like it betrayed my trust.
Yeah.
And nothing, I didn't really thought of it. Right now I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure that has happened somewhere.
For me, I don't know if you saw Swiss Army Man, but Swiss Army Man is a movie that and we're going to keep talking. We're going to be in this sanity versus dreams kind of segment here for a little bit here, but and I think that this movie factors into that. But to me, the betrayal at the end of this movie, where it took me out of it, is when he's trying to explain this magical thing that's happening, this corpse, to these people, to his dad and Mary Elizabeth Winstead, actually, and and their reaction, the dad's reaction, his estranged father's reaction, who's always thought his son is crazy, he just almost immediately is just kind of like, nodding, like, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the only one who's like, what the fuck? Like, she mouths that, you know? To me, like, her reaction is the only acceptable one in this situation, and everyone else accepting it is, like, bizarre.
It is very bizarre.
And to me, I was like, that's not motivated. Like, I liked that movie. I liked everything up to that point, and I was like, their acceptance of this makes no sense. Until a little later when, like, the body, like, zips off into the ocean, then it's like, okay, maybe this is actually happening and not in this guy's head entirely.
Yeah, it almost kind of undermined it.
Yeah, a little bit.
His growth as a character, like, kind of accepting that it doesn't matter how other people see your insanity. Although that movie was, when you find out he's just like creeping on her way hard, and you're like, this is actually unsettling.
Yeah.
Like I feel really bad for Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
It's a kind of a gutsy movie to portray the protagonist is vile.
Yeah.
Is not irredeemable.
Yeah, like, irredeemable. That's the correct. I was like, oh, I really dislike this person extremely.
And at the end, it doesn't win you back over.
You're right. Yeah, it doesn't. That was a strange movie. It was an interesting choice to portray him such like an unredeemable person.
What I liked about that movie, though, is it showed me, like, hey, if you get the funding, you can kind of do whatever the hell you want.
If you can get that Radcliffe on board.
Yeah.
That sweet.
Yeah.
Call up Danny Radcliffe.
Yeah, that sweet Harry Potter.
Yep.
Chris Martinez brings up Michel Gondry in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Science of Sleep. I actually never saw Science of Sleep, but I've seen Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I think that's another good example of the filmmaking as magical realism, too. And, like, you know, things like very subtle things like, oh, she doesn't have a leg in this scene. Like, what's up with that? Never explained, not even pointed out. Like, you'd watch the movie and you wouldn't even notice that. Cars falling out of nowhere and stuff. And, like, it makes sense because in the framework of this movie, we're in a deteriorating mind. You know?
Right, so yeah, it kind of now once again blurs the line.
It blurs the line.
Is this magical realism or is this explained in the context of the film?
I think that, conversely, being John Malkovich is magical realism, but it is still the core conceit of the movie because they don't even know why this is happening. They don't know why there's a door. I mean, unless I'm forgetting an explanation, but I don't think it's ever explained in that movie. They just have a door that goes into John Malkovich's head. That's just how this works, you know? And, like, they accept it. Yeah. It's weird. This is our reality. This is a weird thing happening.
I believe there's a door out there to John Malkovich.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that might have been a documentary. So, yeah. John Cusack's just trapped in there as a passenger now forever. But
what about the film? I'm serious. This sounds like Liar Liar. So the kid makes a wish. It's in our world. Yeah. And he makes a wish on his birthday.
Yeah.
Now, we've all made wishes on our birthday. Nothing's ever happened.
That we know of.
That we know of. Yeah. In my experience, nothing's ever happened to that extent. But for whatever reason, his wish, something magical happens.
Right.
But it's also explained kind of because it's saying the wish came true. But we don't know. I guess we never know why the wish came true.
And it's not really questioned.
So then maybe it is magical realism.
I almost might say that is an example of magical realism. And it fits in because that's a framework of the entire film.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's intense.
Yeah.
I need to go watch Liar Liar immediately.
Dude, Liar Liar is pretty great.
Yeah. It holds up really well.
It holds up. The Mask also holds up.
Oh, Mask is amazing.
Dumb and Dumber does not.
Really? That's the one I haven't seen recently.
Dumb and Dumber,
I
watched it again, and maybe it's just not to my taste anymore, but like I watched it again, and that is a gross out movie, man. It is vile.
That's a bummer. Yeah, there is a lot of gross out humor.
A lot of duty humor.
Yeah. A lot of duty.
Again, John Lipari, magical realism's strongest example is something like Scott Pilgrim versus a World, where our characters live in an established universe but make no mention of the magical elements happening throughout the film. If a character says, hey, this is a magic spell, then that's not magical realism, it's magic. If a character says, let's get out of here, and they open a door into a black hole that takes them to another location, that's magical realism. Imminent Jargon also again says, talking about how filmmaking itself can be magical realism, they talk about musicals. What about musicals? Some are literally fantastic, but I think the general premise of integrated musicals in which the characters can all spontaneously dance in synchronization and with one another, and with the music that we hear on soundtrack, which is usually not diegetically sourced, which means it's not coming from within the world itself, but is the soundtrack, gestures toward another idea of magic appearing in a film, but also in a way that feels natural and ordinary.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point.
I was actually going to bring up La La Land because I was thinking about the scene on the freeway in the beginning. They all just get out of their cars, start dancing on the freeway. Song ends, everyone gets back in their car. Nothing ever happened.
Right.
Driving away.
Yeah. I think that musicals are maybe the most consistent example of magical realism that we have in film. And like, it's funny because musicals are a genre, and one of the core tenets of them is that this happens. This magical realist moment happens where like, yeah, we're all going to dance in tandem and it's a fight. Like West Side Story is like, yeah, these gangs have magic dancing fights. Yeah. And that's normal.
And like everyone will participate in them and know the moves, but then continue right when it's done, continue the story like I mean, nothing it still happened, but not like whatever the song was about progressed. But yeah, it wasn't weird, or
and then it
wasn't out of place.
You have things like the Muppets, the later one with Jason Segel or whatever his name is. I believe in that after the musical number. Like, they all look around at each other like, that was weird. Like, you know, that joke has happened in a few movies. I can't recall exactly which, but, like, where it's like, everyone's like, why did we just do that? Like, what the hell happened?
I think of a more grounded one, like Last 5 Years, though, where they sing to each other to convey their emotions. Right. Or if it's or if it's a solo, they'll sing to themselves. And I almost think that's like an inner monologue type thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's something too that we haven't really touched upon is the use of magical realism to portray a feeling or like an internal monologue of a character. You know, like in La La Land, they start floating in the Griffith Observatory and like they're flying around and stuff like that. And like that's, as a filmmaking standpoint, this is a sort of a surrealist example of, you know, metaphorical filmmaking where the visuals are just saying, okay, they feel elated, they're flying, you know, this thing. But, you know, if you say like, well, what if this is happening in the world of this film, then it's magical realism, you know?
Yeah.
Calvin Delaney brings up a great old slapstick trope. In the Marx Brothers movie, A Night at Casablanca, the main character, Roland, gets blown up with a bomb and returns the next scene with a suit torn up and a dirty face, but nobody questions how he survived. Samuel Cardwell replies to Calvin and said, there's definitely some magical realism in Marx Bros. Films. It's hard to draw the line between magical realism and surrealist or anarchic comedy, the difference between Gilliam in Brazil and Gilliam in Python. But Harpo is generally the one who bends reality a little bit. And I think that's a funny thing where like Bugs Bunny is a great example of this, where crazy things, or like every episode of Roadrunner where, you know, they established like Roadrunner can just run right through this hole in the wall, but then when he tries it, he smashes his face because he knows that it's a fake painted hole, you know, it's not a tunnel, but the Roadrunner doesn't, so it works, you know, like that kind of stuff happens all the time in slapstick comedy, and I do think that that's kind of a form of magical realism.
Yeah, it kind of blends like a Venn diagram of like surrealism and magical realism, and that they're kind of, I mean, they're very similar.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like that actually leads into our next topic here, but like Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a great example of this because it follows its own rules. The toon world has rules and the real world has rules. And within the film, these are all established. And so, like, none of the characters question it. This is the world that they live in, you know?
Toontown.
Toontown.
The town where they are.
Yeah.
It's so good.
The toon's gotta work. Toon's gotta work. And that's jobs,
That's a question is, can magical realism follow rules or must it, by definition, be mysterious? Bradley
is that an alternate reality? Or is it, that's
like,
interesting.
Like, because everything in Who Framed Roger Rabbit has rules, does that mean it's not magical realism because it's been defined?
Feels like Harry Potter situation.
Harry Potter,
honestly.
Yeah. Bradley Spies says, I figure there's two ways you can do it. The viewer understands the rules better than most of the characters, or you can do it where the characters in the world clearly understand it far better than we do, and we sort of have to trust them that it makes sense. So basically dramatic irony or not dramatic irony. And this kind of goes back to the dimensional door or suspension of disbelief, trusting your audience and that kind of thing. Like, can something have rules and be magical realism? Because, like,
Brazil has
rules. Scott Pilgrim versus the World has rules. They're just never stated to us.
Yeah.
The characters all know these rules because in their reality, this is what happens. So that raises the question, for something to be magical realism, does it not have to be accepted by characters? My favorite example of magical realism recently is actually this month's assignment film. And I'm sorry, it's a little harder to get. I think you can get it on Amazon. But it's called Borgman. And there's a scene in this where these two dogs show up. And as the audience, you're kind of like, are these two dogs those two weird guys from before? Like, is this what's going on? Are these dogs? But then later in the film, and like the main character also looks at these dogs and is like, are these dogs those guys? What's happening? You know, like she thinks it. She doesn't say it. Later on, she sees a dog and she goes, she's like looking at it and she just goes, Camille? You know, like she questions it. But I don't think that breaks it away from being magical realism just because a character in the movie is also perplexed by it, because maybe she's just taking a glimpse at it, you know, along with us. Mm-hmm. Because like there are things going on in that movie, and we'll discuss it a little more next month, but like, because I don't want to taint your read on it too much, but like there are things going on in that movie that are definitely magical realist. But I would also say, and I think that the marketing campaign even said that it's a dark urban fairy tale, you know. So like things like fairy tales and fables have a magical realism all the time, like people turning into animals, people like wolves that can talk, that dress up like your grandma and eat you, like things like that are like, fables are so metaphorical that they transfer themselves into this magical world, a fantasy world, you know. And again, it's like this blurry line. Where do you draw it?
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Think of The Witch.
I haven't seen The Witch yet, but
yeah.
I'm too afraid.
It's very intense. But I mean, it's all so blurry, the lines of this, because The Witch is about a witch, obviously,
right?
But it's set in the real world.
Yeah.
But, you know, the witch does some crazy magical things. So it's like, are the characters imagining this? Is it happening? There's some really strange parts at the end.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because that is a movie that I thought the magical realist element betrayed my trust in it.
Really?
And it turned me off to it.
Oh.
So like as things escalate, and it's very grounded in reality at the beginning. And I mean, it's intentional too. Like you and other people watch it and they accept it, but for whatever reason, I was like, oh, I feel like you betrayed my trust, and I don't like what happened. Like it took me out of the film. Yeah. And took me out of the enjoyment of the film. So I didn't enjoy it because of that breach of the trust that I felt. But yeah, it was interesting, because I would agree. Yeah, that is a magical realism element, because they treat the whole movie, you know, for a while everything's real, and then there's different elements that come in that are like, is that magic? Is someone here a witch? Is something going on? Or is it, you know, is everyone kind of just so tense and interpreting it as magic because it's back in the day and they didn't have understandings of science, etc. But then the movie makes a choice. And before that choice, I felt, like there was moments where I felt like I felt my trust betrayed and I didn't enjoy it. So we thought, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that was an example for me, at least.
I'm going to actually jump ahead because you said that into a different topic here, and then we'll go back to sanity and dreams again for a second. But that's an interesting thought, because I think horror and sci-fi do this a lot, where they dance on the line with, is this really happening? Is this not really happening? A lot of films do that. And I mean, this plays into sanity as well, which we'll get into, but think about the movie K-Pax, where it's like, is this guy an alien or not? And like, that movie, if I recall, doesn't exactly make a choice. I know. Midnight Special is another one that recently kind of did sort of something like this, where the whole time you're like doubting or Contact. Like if you're doubting the character is really seeing this stuff, really encountering this stuff, or like, you know, or the movie Frailty, I think, with the one where Matthew McConaughey's dad is like telling him like, we're gonna kill demons, you know, and then you're like, is this guy just a murderer, like a serial killer, or is he actually doing this? Is he actually getting messages from God or whatever? And like, if the film makes a choice, is that better or worse? Like if the film tells you an answer, is that better?
I love the answer in Contact.
Yeah,
I'm all for it.
Yeah, where the alien's like, I'm your dad because I thought it would break your mind. Yeah.
And there's and just rooting for her too. You want it to be real. Like if you can get behind something, and the movie gives you a payoff to like feel good, I'm always down for that.
Yeah. I guess it depends on if the answer adds to the theme and like your own understanding of the film. If it like, you know, like actually that's the final piece that I need to really reflect on this movie. And sometimes not giving the answer is what you needed. It's like, oh, the movie is about my own perception, and like what I project onto it,
right?
And that I think is always, I appreciate both, because like I appreciate, you know, you're like, no, this is what's happening,
right?
And like I'm making a statement, and that's part of the whole piece. And I also appreciate when you are when you're keeping it vague and you're like, you know, it's up to your perception, because both of them are a risk. Yeah. Because both of them could make the audience member not like. I've had times
because if you don't like the answer,
like The Witch, I didn't like the answer, and then in a vague movie like Inception or whatever, like I also didn't like that. I was like, damn, like no, like I didn't want this to be open for discussion. Like,
right.
I was more interested in an answer.
Well, if you look at the details, it's really not open for discussion.
I didn't want to bring that one.
Those
into
are clearly
the mix.
his children.
But I appreciate it because they each, you're taking a risk in like in either one.
I think I don't know if either of you have seen it, but it's one of my favorite films of all time. But Upstream Color is a great example of a film with magical realist elements that doesn't over-explain everything, that is open for your interpretation in a lot of ways, but also you can personally come up with an answer that feels satisfactory within that framework. I think this sort of leads into the topic of scarcity. We've been talking about films that use magical realism as a framework for the entire film. You know, in some cases like Groundhog's Day or any of these other ones. Do you find it more impactful when there is a consistent use of magical realism in the film, as in the setting or central conceit is a magical realist idea, like in Pan's Labyrinth, or when there are only one or two moments of magical realism, like in Magnolia or Borgman or Birdman?
It all depends. I think it's so much riskier doing it just in a moment or two.
Yeah.
Like Magnolia, when is it the frogs, right?
Frog rain, yeah.
Freaking weird moment.
Yeah.
You know, has the potential to take you out of everything that you just watched.
Yeah.
But, you know, it also encourages repeat viewing in a weird way.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now I'm prepared for this time around. Like maybe I should watch this, you know, one more time and kind of take that interpretation into it. So yeah, I think it's risky when you catch people off guard. Like you're talking about Borgman, like the dog scene. That sounds like weirdly jarring.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because I would say the frogs are intentionally jarring in Magnolia, whereas the dogs, Borgman is paced in a way, and like the whole thing is so bizarre that you're kind of like. You kind of like look at it, you kind of side-eye it the way that the character does. You're sort of like, wait, you know. So it's a little less jarring than frogs raining down from the sky suddenly. I would almost even say that, like, I mean, I guess maybe the song's just playing on the radio, but like I think right before the frog rain, they're all singing along with that "Save Me," you know, song, Amy Mann or whoever it is. And that's kind of an interesting moment too. I wonder if that... But the frogs, certainly magical realism.
Yeah.
Birdman, like, does he actually fly? She looks up at the end. Is he flying?
No.
You think he's a splat on the pavement?
Splat, dead. No.
Yeah. And, like, I mean, that movie does things filmically, like, temporally, where, like, things are jumping around in time, you know, and it's just like, okay, yeah, there are definitely artistic conceits happening here. Like, this is not truly a one-take film. It's just meant to look that way.
God, the Birdman ending, so seriously.
Do you like it or not?
There are times I feel like with that like that moment with magical realism, it's almost like saying, we're doing this so you don't know on purpose. So you're gonna have this conversation. It's like so frustrating as a viewer. Like, do we really need that? Whereas Brazil is just enough to have a conversation about, you know, where was he breaking down? You know, where did he go insane? Like, you sort of question everything, but it's not like annoying like that.
Yeah, because in Brazil, you're like, the easy read is like, okay, clearly when Jack is coming at him with the thing, and right before Jack gets shot through the head, you know, that's when the fiction starts. But like, if you're really watching that, like, this time watching it through especially, I was kind of like, I don't know. Like, even within the reality of this film, it seems like a lot of this stuff is pretty bonkers.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you know. Let me see here. Paul Henderson says, the wonder of the impossible as a metaphor for emotion, its magic, only works in mostly normal films. That moment makes the film quirky and surprising, again, like certain emotions. Or it's an outward expression of internal change. I really like that phrase, an outward expression of internal change. Again, it's like this magical realist moment in some cases, like in La La Land when they fly, is like, that's a really on the nose, you know, version of this, but like, that's a super huge, just like, here's the inside of this character's feeling, and I'm showing it to you.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm coming back to them dancing on the freeway. It's like, let's all just let this traffic consume us and not worry about it. Like, let's all just go about our day peacefully.
Yeah.
Would that be considered an outward change? Like musicals? Dance?
I don't know, yeah. I mean, a lot of times I think it would, because it's an emotion so powerful that you can only express it through song and dance.
Yeah, I feel like musicals we'll keep coming back to them, I'm sure, because that is a musical that is what it's about. It's about expressing these ideas through this outward display, these internal, you know, the character's internal emotions or turmoils being expressed, you know, in crazy dance numbers.
Yeah. Max Miller brings up a great example from literature. Would be pretty much any one of Haruki Murakami's books, Haruki Murakami's books, like 1Q84 or, you know, Kafka on the Shore. He can write a trans-dimensional chase scene with the same level of detail as he writes about the main character making a sandwich. I thought that was really good. Robert Figueroa deftly points out magical realism is much harder to do in film than in books. Your imagination just has more budget. I think that's actually really good. A lot of patrons,
great line.
A lot of patrons brought up 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I haven't read that. I should, but I've definitely heard that cited many times as having magical realist moments. And let's get back to the sanity.
Weirdly
thing.
Off topic, but going back to something you were saying earlier, I'm like syndroming out here. I apologize, Ian.
Absolutely.
You were talking about the way you film a movie, if that is enough. Yeah. And for whatever reason, I'm thinking of Watchmen.
Okay.
And the way they film it, you know, and the colors and everything, it is so magical. But everyone aside from Dr. Manhattan is a normal human with no magic powers.
Right.
But the way they fight and do everything is kind of this superhuman magical feeling.
Does Ozymandias have a supernatural like intelligence?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. It's never really expressed.
Like the Joker, I heard that an explanation of the Joker is that he actually is a supervillain because he's so smart that he went crazy, you know, which explains his like weird circuitous plans. But I definitely I'm kind of in love with this idea that I hadn't really thought about in these terms until preparing for this episode. But this idea that the filmmaking itself can be magical realism, like
that's very interesting.
The choice
I want to
cut.
Explore that more.
Yeah, like your choice of cut, your choice of lens, your choice of shot. I mean,
you think of that amazing opening fight scene in Watchmen, and it's like two normal guys having a hand-to-hand fight scene, but it just feels like these guys are superhumans, you know, smashing each other on the desks
and throwing people like balls. I guess
just because of the way it's filmed.
Like how it's filmed and like the lenses. Because like definitely you always make a choice,
right?
And so is that choice based in magical realism? Now I'm like trying to think.
I mean,
like how to
editing. I think that a formal edit, you know, where an edit is, you know, you cut from a guy being laced up in a straitjacket to his son tying his shoe, right? Like that's a formal edit because you cut from the tying of the father into the straitjacket to the son tying his shoe, like he's having a normal life. I just made that example up. I don't know if that ever happens in a movie, but
find that in the movie.
Yeah, find that. You know, check Jacob's Ladder, or well, no, his kid's dead, but like, you wonder, like, I mean, in a way, it's like come on, you could say whatever you want, like, oh yeah, the filmmaking is magical realism. I mean, like, yeah, we get it. We're off the reservation here, but like, it's just an interesting thought exercise, I think.
Yeah.
But no, yes, a perfect example of this is the movie Shutter Island, because I was watching the movie Shutter Island and I was like, I was sitting there and the editing was terrible in the beginning part of the movie. The shots were bad. They were poorly set up, The mise-en-scène was cluttered and bizarre. The green screen looked intentionally poor. Like, it almost looked like rear projection. Like, the filmmaking techniques were being pointed out to me. Like, so bad. And, like, trusting the filmmakers, like, I thought to myself on the first viewing, not even subsequent viewing, I thought to myself, this is so crappy that it has to be an intentional choice. It has to be. Or, like, the world has truly gone insane. And then, like, as you watch back through, like, as you get to the end of the movie and you think back, all of the parts of the movie that are, like, poorly made, like, those really obvious composition shots or, like, really clunky, bizarre editing, really weird shots, stilted movement and dialogue, those are all the performance parts of the thing. It's all the fake parts of the narrative. Mm-hmm. And, like, that is a perfect example of the filmmaking supporting this like magical realist in a sense, but like intentionally poor filmmaking, taking you out of a film to say to a watchful viewer, like to a deft eye, like, hey, this is not right. Mm-hmm. This is not real. This is not perfectly executed on purpose, which, I mean, maybe I'm giving them too much credit and maybe it was just bad, but like, to me, that's an amazingly intense and almost brilliant choice to like make a bad movie for a segment, because it gets better later. Like the beginning part, just the exposition, like maybe the first 20-30 minutes of this movie are like weirdly assembled. So much so that I was convinced that it had to be intentional.
Had to be. Scorsese.
Yeah. It's like,
he's not messing around.
Right.
Yeah, it would be weird if it, because they could afford reshoots.
Right.
Like they could.
Right.
So yeah, it must have been.
It was totally inconsistent with the rest of the film. And I don't think that movie is like great.
I feel like every director ever should be required, like if you want to make a movie, you have to at some point in your career make a horror movie.
Interesting.
Should be a requirement. Every single one. Try your hand.
That's actually not a bad point, Like, I mean, think about The Shining, oh my God. Yeah. I would love to see the Coen brothers make a straight up horror movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like they dance around it, they make definitely horrific moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
and I mean, Barton Fink has some great magical realist stuff in it where like wallpaper is representative of somebody's like psyche kind of, and like what's in the box, and like, is this guy Satan? Like, I will show you the life of the mind. Like, oh God, I love that movie. But like, that's kind of horror elements, but it's always through their lens of comedy,
Yeah.
I think they make a lot of existential horror movies.
Yeah,
like almost all of them.
Oh God,
sure.
I do want to. Speaking of Barton Fink and like unraveling wallpaper, I do want to touch once again on sanity and dreams. Do films that deal with character sanity or trustworthiness as a narrator include magical realism, like Trainspotting, like he's high on drugs and there's a baby on the ceiling, or Jacob's Ladder, Fight Club, Mulholland Drive, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Perfect Blue, etc. Do dreams count? Does American Beauty have magical realism in it, or is that just dreams? John Lipari, again, says magical realism is also usually misinterpreted as dream sequences and drug hallucinations. Although the world may change around your protagonist in these situations, it's still explained in context by either the influence of the drugs or the state of the consciousness of our protagonist. Leon Alexandru again offers, in my opinion, topics that cover a character's mental state or their dreams or psyche in general fall into the surrealist genre. Surrealism seeks to express the subconscious, unconscious, and repressed, and the inexpressible, and by contrast, magical realism rarely presents the extraordinary in the form of a dream or a psychological experience. Magical realism books and films use the real, tangible, mundane world and then suggest the magical and supernatural within it.
I feel like now's a good time to talk about 12 Monkeys.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's always a good time to talk about 12 Monkeys.
I haven't seen the movie in a while, but I mean, that idea of, you know, a character being insane and playing on what is real and what is, you know, he's in a mental institution.
Right.
It's like, no, is this guy crazy or is he actually from the future?
Right.
I think that is like the main.
Well, and like Brad Pitt being crazy in that movie, and like you think the whole time. I mean, and this is another thing about the audience and like letting them in on the joke or not. Like, you think the whole time that, like, okay, clearly it's this guy. He's out of his mind, you know? And he does do the 12 monkeys, but all he's doing is releasing a bunch of animals from the zoo, you know? And, like, this other guy's behind everything, you know? Like,
yeah, he's like a red herring.
It's a red herring.
Yeah.
And, like,
yeah.
That's an interesting kind of take on that.
Yeah.
But,
I think for my definition at least, and it sounds like we all agree, the sanity and like the drug hallucination, or when it's explained through that, then to me that doesn't fall under,
I would agree,
magical realism. And interesting, I guess I don't know if it's surrealism, which is an interesting idea that they brought up, but I feel like it has to be this separate, unexplainable, and it doesn't always have to be unexplainable, maybe. But
I think that, I don't think it always has to be...
Like, that's not the right word, but it has to be, like, separate from our reality. Whereas in our reality, you can have a dream and a drug hallucination.
Right.
That's part of our reality. There's nothing magical about that.
Right, exactly. And just because it's a film and we're showing something that is... Like, if there was a movie and a baby was crawling across the ceiling and someone wasn't on drugs, but then they were just like... I mean, Addams Family is a good example of stuff like this, where, like, things will happen, like, those kids cannot die, you know? And, like, stuff like that. Like, I think that is a great example of magical realism all over. They're, like, examples almost constantly in those movies.
Addams Family is a good example.
They're, like,
Beetlejuice?
Beetlejuice, kind of. Beetlejuice is explained, though, because they're ghosts. They can do stuff like that. Addams Family, they're human beings, and, like, they exist in our reality, but it's just because their family is weird. They can, you know, a baby can catch a guillotine with its fingers. And, like, Uncle Fester can, like, be struck by lightning, and that's fine, you know? Like...
The Hand? Do they ever explain the Hand?
Thing? No. It's just a thing that exists. And, like, Cousin It, you know? He just is Cousin It. Like, the explanation is, oh, that's just the Addams Family. Yeah. That's just my crowd, you know?
They're weird.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Addams Family in, no joke, 20 years.
Addams Family 1 and 2
I need to see it
are
again.
like among my favorite.
Yeah,
I need to rewatch it.
I watched the VHSs. Like,
they are beautiful. Yeah. Also, like, speaking of romance, like,
I want to watch that.
The weirdest example, like, the greatest couple in film history possibly are Gomez and Morticia Addams. Like, they are endlessly supportive, loving, doting, excited about each other. You know, like. They're like the perfect couple, and the movie doesn't ever deal with them like trying to break up or like any strife. It's just they're rock solid from A to B. Like even when also I love how Gomez is always the one who comes unhinged, but like even when Gomez is coming unraveled, Morticia is right there by his side. Like she doesn't. It's never a threat to their relationship. She just wants him to be happy and well.
You're
right.
Know? It's like one of the. They very few do you see such a positive relationship portrayed in a film, like a supportive, and healthy relationship, extremely healthy relationship.
They always have like the breakup, get back together, you know.
Yeah, and everything else, like even like any movie.
I forgot about that. Yeah, they are very supportive and like
they're beautiful. Yeah, they are the greatest couple in history, and like I'm not joking. And like
awesome.
Almost any other movie where a couple starts together, like you know they're gonna break up, or like in the case of Midnight in Paris, another movie with say what you will about Woody Allen, but like Midnight in Paris I actually kind of liked, and like it's got some magical realist moments because is he really going back in time, like is all this happening, or is he just
Hemingway
a drunk weirdo?
In the car,
Hemingway's hilarious, but like the beginning of that movie he is with someone who is so clearly a piece of crap in a relationship. It's just like telegraphed from the word go, like hey, this person, they're gonna break up because she's the worst, like that's how relationships are in movies, usually. Or they like dance around each other and then bang.
Or they just show like very toxic relationships that they try and not say are toxic. That's what always gets me. It's like actually these people are in a very unhealthy relationship, and the film or TV show is like not aware of that.
Right.
They're like actually propagating a really
my God.
Yeah, when that happens in films when they're like this like those people shouldn't be together. There shouldn't be happy music playing. Like like kind of like how we felt at what we were talking about Swiss Army Man. Like like that's actually very unsettling and very like he's like ruining her life.
The biggest example.
Like,
the biggest
it's
example.
Not a good thing. It's not a redeemable thing.
The biggest recent example for me is Passengers. That movie.
Oh my God! Yeah, you were telling me
that
about
movie.
That.
Like upset me for days with how messed up it is. Like it's basically just Stockholm Syndrome. The movie. It's ridiculous. But I do suggest Nerdwriter 1 has an amazing video called Passengers Rearranged, I think, where he takes her segment and puts it first, and how that makes this movie way better. And then like the Twilight Zone ending that he proposes is incredible, and I really recommend you watch that movie or that video. Almost done here. Real quick, I do want, we're Easy Allies. We talk about video games a lot. I do want to just briefly, I asked, what are video game examples of magical realism? And I think like Metal Gear Solid is like a huge one because and Nier Automata, like any of these games that like play with the conceit of video gaming itself, where like you are the rube, kind of like that kind of stuff is really interesting. Kentucky Route Zero is like a very Lynchian kind of like narrative.
I think of I just played What Remains of Edith Finch, but I think of Unfinished Swan.
Unfinished Swan
is
I gotta play on Edith Finch too. I haven't played that.
Beautiful.
Samuel Cardwell, you'll like this one, Huber. Samuel Cardwell offers Life is Strange is a pretty great example of magical realism in video games. It's a thoroughly realistic setting wherein the main character, and only the main character, has one unexplained supernatural ability.
Yeah.
It's like Liar Liar.
And
like Liar Liar, basically.
Yeah. And the Life is Strange of this year, Night in the Woods. It's just a bunch of they're all animals.
Yeah.
They're all animals, but it's real life. So I was at college and back, and she's a cat.
Right.
It's like
just a few other thoughts that I liked that I couldn't really fit into anything. Alexander Ziranov asks, does the 5-point palm exploding heart technique from Kill Bill count?
I was hoping we'd talk about.
I would say probably.
I was hoping we'd talk about Tarantino.
Yeah, Tarantino brushes up against this a lot, I think.
Yeah.
Like just in a lot of weird different ways.
Yeah, I've heard the word surrealism thrown around a bit. And, he definitely dances the line of surreal and magical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about the bride's mentor, I can't remember his name, but the guy with the big beard,
Yeah.
And like how she gets out of that coffin and like all
Pai
that
Mei.
Pai Mei, yeah. Like there are elements of it all over the place. It's pretty crazy.
I wonder, is it because she's was taught it and it's part of that hyper real world? Is it magical? Because it's
it's a technique that she learned within this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the takeaway from today. Oh, Alejandro Medina also brought up the yellow bastard from Sin City. Like he's just some yellow bastard. Like what's up with that?
Freak. That actually makes me want to talk about too, because we were talking about a little bit about Watchmen and Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah.
And some animated movies. Does it matter if it was a comic before? Because I feel like comic books don't really have to set up rules as much.
Right.
When I go into a comic, I know I'm reading a comic book. Like there's going to be some kind of
and it's much like prose. Like in a film, you've got to show stuff.
Yeah. Like
in a book, like Blood Meridian, for example, like characters in a lot of Cormac McCarthy works. And I do think that the Coen Brothers film No Country for Old Men captures this really well, but my interpretation of a lot of McCarthy's characters are not that they're humans. They're more they're like we talked about with Mad Max, they're forces of nature.
Yeah.
Like the judge in Blood Meridian is more of just the embodiment of violence and change than anything else, it's interesting because books can just do that. They can just be weird and they don't have to show it.
Yeah.
So they can be more vague.
The way it came out, I don't want to say I'm comics don't have to set up as much
or
something.
No.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing. I think I think that in a certain way, it's comics are between the two, where it's like a visual medium, but you can hide things between the panels,
And even in just my perception going in, I'm expecting magical. I'm expecting magic just from reading a comic, I don't know.
Yeah, because
it's like superheroes and stuff. I'm expecting the supernatural. I'm expecting a heightened level of, suspension of disbelief in a way.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm sure they exist, and obviously you could make one where a comic is just very real and grounded.
Yeah,
but then
so many.
And then you're kind of like, well, then was the comic form the right medium for that story? Because like you're right, like usually you would choose that form of storytelling, that medium of storytelling, because it allows you to bend these rules and the disbelief. Like if the story's just grounded in reality, would it have just been better filmed with real people? And like sometimes you don't have the means for that, or sometimes there's something about the visual nature of it that, you know, the comic was the correct form for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gets, but you're right, because like I was thinking the same thing. I was like, why do I I guess it's not necessarily true, but when I'm reading a comic or a graphic novel, I'm expecting like, oh, because it's on this visual comic format, that must mean they wanted to express something that you couldn't express in other mediums. So there's something about, so yeah, there is a weird, more like of a suspension for disbelief. You're like, all right, you're gonna kind of stretch my imagination more so than just like
I think of Road to Perdition. That was a comic first.
Well, and like you have to wonder,
grounded, realistic, normal, straightforward story, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have to wonder sometimes, like, to take it one further in the analysis, you know, like, maybe that's the point sometimes. Like, maybe I'm writing a comic book because I know you're expecting it to get weird.
Yeah.
And I'm going to trick you by making it not get weird. It's like a film by a filmmaker, you know, and I don't want to spoil anything by saying anyone, but like a film by a filmmaker who every one of his movies has been sad. You know, every one of this person's movies has been depressing as hell. So then when you go to see the new one, you're expecting that, you know, and then it has a happy ending, and that blows you away because that wasn't what you bargained for. You know, you'd steeled yourself for this like depressing thing, and then you're like, oh my god. You know?
When Takashi Miike doesn't get weird when he makes 13 Assassins.
Right. I mean, that's why 13 Assassins is one of my favorite movies of all time, because it's his most disciplined work. It's his most mature work. It's also startlingly violent, like his other stuff, but it's grounded. You know?
Yep.
All right. 2 more things to close out. Fender Belly Bodine suggests that it might be fun if we do a top 5 segment for every theme. Like this month it would be top 5 magical realist movies. I think it would be fun if we kind of do it on the spot. And it's 5 total, not each.
5 total.
And
we're definitely putting Brazil in there.
All right, sure.
Phenomenal
But
movie.
does it count?
Yeah, but now we're saying
does it count in magical realism?
After our conversation,
So like after this conversation, can we come up with 5 movies that qualify?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say Borgman, but it's not fair because you guys haven't seen it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
But you love it. It's a group list.
Upstream Color, I think, is another good example.
You love that one too,
yeah. We did talk a lot about Wes Anderson, and I think that those kind of fit. Life Aquatic, that kind of stuff.
Could fit, yeah.
Birdman, I think, fits.
Miyazaki film.
Miyazaki stuff. Scott Pilgrim, obviously. Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Scott Pilgrim is a pretty clear example.
Let's just pop that up there on number 1. You know,
that's in the
Howl's Moving Castle. I want to put in there.
Okay.
Does that count as?
I think we.
I don't remember where we came down on that because like
we were kind of mixed.
Yeah,
it starts like they're saying. It starts off normal and then
a Wizard of Oz kind of deal where it's like once you know, then you're in.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's that's the thing. It's like such a muddy middle ground, you know.
Yeah.
That is magical realism in a nutshell.
Yeah. That's
true.
Sort of the beauty of this that we're finding is that the term itself is like the thing. It's
fast and loose.
There's a word for that.
It's like onomatopoeia for how a word can sound like what it is, but like
that's
where
so funny.
Where the word itself, the definition is also an example of the thing itself. Like it's very hard to define, just like a magical realist moment.
That's what this is completely off topic, and I'm forgetting the word for a word that's spelt the same forward and backwards.
Palindrome.
Palindrome, yep.
So furious that palindrome is not a palindrome.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that makes me, every time I hear that word or think about that concept, I get so mad that I was like, whoever created that, just make the palindrome a palindrome. That'd be so, what? Then it explains itself.
I submitted a word, I made up a word and submitted it to the Oxford Dictionary. They denied it. I think it was something like squornge. But, you know, some stupid like that. But the definition was a word that doesn't rhyme with any other word. And like, the joke was that it rhymes with orange.
That's brilliant.
So it's ruining one of the, you know, the cliche examples of that. But anyway, yeah, Scott Pilgrim.
Scott Pilgrim's on there, yeah.
Borgman.
We'll throw Borgman on.
Upstream Color fits, I don't know.
Upstream Color.
Funny Games fits. Oh, God.
Top 5 are so brutal.
Being John Malkovich.
Being John Malkovich. Get it in there. Liar,
Magnolia.
liar, get it in there.
Liar.
Number 1.
So that's like 5. Yeah. All right. So then the last thing before we talk about the next month's assignment is the quote challenge.
Oh yeah.
So
yes.
Hubert, do you have one? Do you want to go first?
One.
I feel like I went first last time.
I got one.
I don't remember.
I love this quote.
Okay. We'll see if we can guess it. If you get it, don't say it right away until we confirm with each other.
You can go first.
Okay.
Why don't you go first?
All right. Now I'll show you what I already know. Now I'll show you what I already know. And then it goes like this.
I'm never going to get one of these, Ian.
Ooh.
You're too
you
good.
know this movie.
Do you know it, Justin?
No, but
here's another one. I intentionally started hard, so here's another one.
Okay.
Maybe we're at war with Norway. Or no, maybe we at war with Norway. That's the actual quote.
What? I don't know if I know that one. I'm sure I...
This is all the same movie.
Wowzer.
Okay, how about this one?
Where are we right now?
How about this one?
Yeah, where are we? Even like, what genre are we even in?
All right, how about this one? Checkmate, checkmate, and then he pours coffee on it, and he just goes, cheating bitch.
All right. Damn, those are really good.
I picked really hard ones because I know that you love this movie.
Yeah,
I know you love this movie, Huber. So I picked really hard quotes from it. How about this one? I'm a real light sleeper, Childs.
Childs?
Mm-hmm.
Revolver?
Mm-mm.
No. Oh man, I don't know.
You know it.
You know it.
I don't even know.
I'm trying to think of like other ones from it now because those are all the ones I wrote down.
You're a real light sleeper, Childs.
I thought this is a paraphrase, but it's like, I thought you might say that. We'll test your blood last. That's a paraphrase. That's not an exact quote, but that's what he says, kind of.
I have no idea.
Whatever the fuck that thing is, it's mad as hell.
The Thing?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank God. Okay. Dude, those are hard.
I know. It's putting you on the spot. It's a stressful game. It's a stressful game. We won't get your name.
That's the one that...
The computer,
that scene is
and then he pours coffee on it and calls it a cheating bitch.
Yeah.
They're all going insane out there.
That's so funny because I've seen when I showed Yuli The Thing.
Yeah.
Yuli's my roommate. Yeah, he had never seen it.
He betrayed me once.
This was after the betrayal. I showed him The Thing. And he was so mad at that scene. He's like, why do you have to kill the whole computer? I was like, it's because that's his character. He's like an angry, like he's like fed up.
Plus, they've been out there for so long. They just don't care anymore.
He just doesn't give a shit. He's just like so mad. Yeah.
All right, Hubert, give it to us.
All right. I try to pick quotes that I like always say for whatever reason.
Yeah, maybe I'll go easier next time so it's less obscure. But I picked a movie off your favorites list because I wanted to make sure you'd seen it.
I need to know who he is. I need to stand there. I need to look him in the eye, and I need to know that it's him.
Pudge. I've definitely seen this.
You've definitely seen it.
Oh, Hubert.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
I know it's like a revenge thing, right?
No.
Is he a cop?
There's a cop involved.
But not the one speaking.
Not the one speaking.
What the hell?
It's also a scene where somebody gets a phone call in the middle of the night and says, whoever this is, you owe me another lamp.
Oh, because he knocks the lamp off the shelf. Off the nightstand. Oh my God. Is he a detective?
Not the initial character.
Damn it, what is this?
Is this Heat?
No.
Okay, I was like... No.
I feel like it's something like Heat.
Yeah, something, I was like, there's some...
Just because
LA
you can't
Confidential?
Just because you can't prove it, it doesn't mean it isn't true. Easy, Dirty Harry.
Well, so it's not Dirty Harry.
It's not Dirty Harry.
Ooh, this is a good one.
Huber.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time. One of the greats.
Is it from the 80s?
Nope.
All right.
2000s.
Whoa.
Oh.
Wow.
2000.
Give us another hint. Give us another one.
This is a doozy.
You have another one? The people at home are like, it's this, it's this.
No, it's pretty tough.
I know that I've seen it. I'm going to kick myself when you tell me this.
These are always so fun.
Methinks our friend's a tad bit fuckered in the head.
Oh my god. Is it like Snatch? Or...
Here's the last one. This is a cool exchange. I love this part. Whoa. Dude, he wears his gun like Bullet. No, McQueen got that from him.
Whoa. Damn it. What is this? Not Lethal Weapon. Because I've never seen that.
You ever seen Lethal
Weapon?
Weapon?
Damn it. What is it? I give up.
Zodiac. Zodiac.
That was like one of my first guesses. I was going to say Zodiac, and then I was like,
I felt like you were there, then you like drifted away from it.
Yeah, it was it was like almost there, but not enough for me to say it. Did you have one, Justin?
Yeah, I have one. I think I remember it, but I'm gonna look at it.
That was hard. So Huber, you stumped us.
It's a hard one. Zodiac's a hard one.
I was like, it has a very, all those quotes have a Fincher vibe, you know. Even though he probably didn't write that script, but
I love that movie.
I've only seen it once.
God, I love it so much.
Yeah.
It is in terms of, it's like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But I always like to say it is the longest, shortest movie ever. That 2.5 hours of non-stop dates and facts and information coming at you.
Fincher's
just
great at
flies
pace.
by.
That was like I took one of my favorite movie viewing. Well, not favorite, but like I really enjoyed watching Das Boot. I watched it by myself in my house. I just like had a Saturday, and I took like 2 hours. Got up, like took a break.
Yeah.
Came back, watched the other 2 hours. Yeah.
Oh, you told me. You told me this one is sort of a reference to last week's one.
Okay.
Oh, all right.
Forget it, Nicholas. It's Sanford.
So they're referencing Chinatown.
Rushmore.
Hot Fuzz?
Yep.
Oh! Whoa!
Nice.
How did I just know that? That was weird.
Yeah, great.
Damn, Ian, dude.
All right. Well, that's Reaction Shots. Like I said earlier, the assignment film for this month is Borgman. If it's not on Netflix, check Amazon Prime, or you can rent it. I'm sorry, I usually try to pick movies that are pretty widely available. But
once in a while, you got to pick something passionate.
Yeah. This movie I think is criminally underviewed, and I just love it. Warning, it's kind of intense. It's a pretty wild movie. But
hard R.
It's R.
Hard R.
It's more like psychologically R than it's a disturbing movie, but not overly disturbing. It's weird, but yeah. I mean, it's not like there's no like it's not jump out and scare you. There's no but Borgman. Because it fits this month's theme very, very well. And it fits the 2 themes for next month that I'm still juggling between in my mind. That I'll let you know in a couple of weeks which one I settle on. So look forward to that. But yeah, thank you, Justin and Jelma.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Tell them your Twitter address.
Oh yeah, it's at Ecombocum.
Ecombocum. Yeah. Banjo-Kazooie.
EKOMBOKOM. That's my Twitter, Instagram, all the good stuff.
Sweet. Have you played ukulele?
I'm actually playing it right now.
Nice. Do you like it?
I was talking to my friend about it. I feel like I'm playing an HD re-release of a game that came out
perfect.
Like right at like Banjo-Tooie.
Yes.
Like they reskinned it and re-released it. It's
Hell
like,
yeah.
Like to a fault maybe.
Yeah.
Exactly from that era, but I love it.
Nice.
I'm just like because I feel like I would maybe I haven't replayed Banjo-Kazooie or Tooie in a while, and I feel like I might get frustrated for some reason, like going back and playing it, because like they did, you know, it's updated. I'm playing it on my PC, stuff like that. So, and it's you know, the graphics are updated and everything. So I jumped in. I was like, oh my god, this is literally tripping me out. I was like, did I play this as a kid? Like, yes, but no. Like, but so I'm very much enjoying it. I love it, and what Banjo-Kazooie has and what this has is just like that innocence. Yeah. There's just like this beautiful innocence and like the music and the characters and the world. Totally. And yeah, so I'm actually playing it right now and very much enjoying it. Yeah.
That's great.
But I imagine I was talking to my friend if you haven't, I was talking to Yuli about it, and I was like, if you haven't played,
you betrayed me one time.
If you haven't played Banjo-Kazooie and like adored them, like I was obsessed with those games. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you would like this, probably because it is so, you know, of that era. Totally. So if you kind of missed out on it, you might not appreciate that.
Missed the boat.
Yeah, if you missed the boat, but I was on that boat. And now I'm back on it.
Back on that boat.
I got my little happy hour. I'm just like, woo! So, yeah, I'm enjoying it.
I don't know if this will hold water enough for a topic for an entire episode, but, like, movies that if you miss the boat, you won't like them. Like, a friend of mine said that they'd never seen Goonies, you know, and we all love Goonies. But then, like,
love it.
They watched Goonies when they were, like, 30.
Totally.
And they were like, yeah. And I was like, whoa, dude. Yeah. And then I thought about it from their perspective, and without any nostalgia, I wonder, you know. Yeah. I think it's a good movie. But, all right. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching and listening. Thank you, Huber. Thank you.
Thank
Justin.
you both.
Learned some stuff today.
Thanks for coming by. I'm sure I'll harass you to come on again.
Love to. Would love to, yeah.
Yeah, but thanks for watching. Good night and good movies.
I like that.
Enjoy the show.
Enjoy the show. Life, the greatest movie of them all. All right, bye.